Seeing a presence of a quorum, I call this meeting to order at 6:35 p.m. And a note to everyone, this meeting is being recorded by Amherst Media, and for the first time in
a while,
it is being live streamed and on their website and broadcast on Channel 15.
It's been a while.
So our first order of business is to review and approve the minutes from November 12th, 2019. Mr. Denham?
I had a number of structural changes with the minutes that I think might be a little lengthy to get through, so I was going to see if we could table the minutes to the next meeting.
I would agree with that. I think there's a few pieces here that need to be completely redone.
I agree. So we'll table that and
To the next meeting.
till the next meeting. Okay. Good. Moving on to the next order is committee announcements. Are there any announcements?
I'm looking at Mr. Demling to see if perhaps we should make mention of the Student Opportunity Act that was passed just a week and a half ago. We haven't met, this committee hasn't met since that happened. I think that's right.
Yeah, go. Would you like to mention it? Well, I mean, Student Opportunity Act is a very large education bill that recently passed. It's too complex to summarize here. And for our type of district, our regional district and our district of flat and declining enrollment, we were not the primary target of this education bill, but there were a lot of pieces that were added, many from advocacy from individuals in our 4-member towns and with our state representatives, Senator Comerford, Representative Dohm, Representative Blay, that hopefully we should improve things for us in the future. There was one specific change that I think will help us immediately, which is allowing out-of-district transportation to be eligible for circuit breaker. There's also a low and declining enrollment rural schools commission that was set up, and also a commitment that Senator Comerford secured from the Senate to study charter school funding. So a lot of irons in the fire. We'll see how it shakes out. It all has to be paid for, of course. But it was a long time coming, and it's a lot of good for a lot of districts, particularly like our brothers and sisters in Holyoke, Springfield, Brockton, all cities that have been profoundly underfunded for many years. They're finally going to be getting a level of funding close to adequate for them. So good for them, and hopefully good for the rest of us as well.
And if I can, just one quick, just a quick addition, the MSBA has actually, there's a cap that's been lifted or increased rather, which may actually end up helping. We had a conversation about this at the Four Towns meeting on Saturday, where, projects like windows and roofs and things like that, which we've applied for before with the middle school, could potentially be approved, or there's an increased likelihood of approval simply because they're going to have more money. So it's good news.
Ms. Dancer?
One additional comment. There also is now a requirement that charter schools have to provide the same reporting to the state that public schools do. And in the long term, that may have some impact on us as data is collected.
Any more announcements? Mr. Funch?
Yeah, I think it's important to note that this legislative accomplishment didn't happen in a vacuum, that it was the result of a lot of organizing and work outside the confines of the legislature to bring it about. And I think that needs to be underscored. I think we also owe a very high debt of gratitude to our local representatives. They have all been working tirelessly to get this passed with little subtractions, and so I think they deserve our applause. Thank you.
Okay. Any more announcements? Nope. Okay. With that, we'll move on to public comment. We did have a sign-in sheet, but I don't think that everybody saw it. So we'll start with the folks that have signed in first, but then we'll be open for additional comment from anybody else who chooses to speak. And I'll remind folks, we have a timer up here. that each individual will have 3 minutes to speak, and I'll give a warning, we won't be absolute cutoff, but please try to keep it under 3 minutes for each. So Mick O'Connor?
Thank you. In full disclosure, I don't think this is on.
Oh, check with.
Try
You
again.
said yes?
You said try it again.
Okay.
Yeah, go.
In full disclosure, I am a resident of this district, and I am an employee of this district, and I am the president of the Amherst Pelham Educators Association. And that's why I'm here. On behalf of the members of the Amherst Pelham Education Association, I am here to demand that the school committee and the district administration take whatever steps are necessary to stop harassment and abuse aimed at educators. The APA respects everyone's right to voice their opinion, and educators welcome constructive input from the community. We support advocates who call for meaningful and needed changes and reforms. But we cannot stand by silently when that advocacy turns to harassment and personal attacks. For the past 3 years, with full knowledge of the district's administration and elected members of the school committee, educators have been subjected to abusive attacks and baseless complaints. To a large degree, the harassment has been enabled by appeasement or inaction on the part of the administration. Given the hateful language used in some of these messages, delivered in person or sent to educators, these interactions are instances of personal assault. The administration has an obligation to maintain, by its own policies, to maintain a safe environment for staff and students, and that is not happening. And this is not the only instances where educators have been and continue to be harassed and their personal and professional integrity undermined. Educators need and deserve transparency and action around the issue of maintaining a safe learning environment. Members of the APA will continue to report instances of abuse, and we shall do whatever is necessary to protect the safety of educators and students. As educators, we develop curricula and we teach our students to stand up to harassment and bullying. We are here to model what it is to be upstanders, and we insist that you do your part. As advocates of the well-being of all our students, members of the APA are sounding an urgent warning about a hostile environment being created in our workplace, the place where our students learn. The administration must act now to end the harassment and abusive actions aimed at educators. Thank you.
Thank you. Catherine Oppie?
I'm Catherine Oppie. I'm a resident of Amherst. And as a former school committee member and chair who served 2 3-year terms, I understand from personal experience that local politics can be extremely contentious and at times mean-spirited. In my years of service, I witnessed unfair and even malicious personal attacks made both by community members and members of the school committee. Anonymous allegations and defamatory comments also appeared in online blogs. That said, nothing I experienced as a committee member rivals in its venom or vitriol the unfounded allegations and smears launched over the last several months. It is particularly disturbing that the targets of that bullying have included not just school committee members and administrators, but students and teachers. the very people our town should be united in treating with the utmost fairness and support. Of course, we tolerate free speech and open criticism, but not unfounded character assassination. People who claim to be advocates for students, yet engage in libeling students and their teachers, are engaging in a form of bullying that should never be tolerated. Thank you.
Thank you. Farah?
Hi, my name's Farah Amin. I'm the parent of a 4th grader at Crocker Farm. I don't normally like speaking in public, but I've been feeling compelled to do so for a while. I'm actually up here just basically to thank our teachers and our educators and our school committee and the superintendent for the great job they've been doing. But also to talk a little bit about bullying, because I've been talking about that a lot with my 10-year-old. And I've been talking about if you see something, say something, don't be part of a mob, and talking to her about how name-calling and harassment is not okay. And I feel like if my 10-year-old can understand that people in this community who are in their 30s and 40s and 50s and continue to do so and tend to resort to name-calling or harassing people the way they've been doing and the way they've been using social media, that it's really disgusting and disheartening, because we live in a really small community where this is our safe space. A lot of us moved here because of the schools and because of our kids. And right now, just the political climate in the country is just so disgusting. And if we have that, and then we have the safe space where people who are doing their hardest for our kids every day are afraid to go to work or quit their jobs or just don't want to be doing what they are trained to do, then it just makes you question what we're doing here. And I feel like the aim here is to work towards something for the next generation, for our kids. And that's what we're all trying to do as a community. And it's time to just stop all this negative behavior and this name-calling and harassment and just let people do their jobs and respect one another and just work together for our kids and for our community. Thank you.
Is there any additional community members wishing to make public comment? Yep.
Hi, my name is Caridad, and I am a community member. I'm also a member of the School Equity Task Force. So I was not even aware that this was happening tonight. I know that doesn't say a lot about the School Equity Task Force, but anyway. What I find interesting, though, and I had been wanting to kind of write to the board about this because I know who the teachers are talking about. I know who people are talking about. So even though people don't say the name, we all know who you're talking about. And one of the things that I've been focusing on, and so I'd like to put it out there, is that I'm not going to take part. I'm not going to make a decision whether it's good or bad or not. I'm not going to get involved in that. I'm not going to get involved in that. What I'm going to say is what I did tell the board. I told the Amherst School Board, I believe it was. And it was that in spite of all the negativity and all the things that are being said that are making some people feel really bad and are making some people feel really uncomfortable, that I think it is the responsibility of this board, right, to investigate the allegations that this person is talking about. So if a community member and other community members are concerned about the way money is being used or the way the budget is being allocated, et cetera, then it is a responsibility of this board, right, to investigate that. And that is in spite of all the things that are being said. So that's why I'm not going to take part in it's good, it's bad, it's not. I don't know all the things that are happening, but clearly there are things that have been said, apparently from what I'm hearing about individuals. I do know some individuals that things have been said and have shared that with me. But the point is, and I'll say it again as I said it in a written document to the board, it is a responsibility of the board to investigate the allegations. Because if the things that are being read or are being said or are being written are not true, then you can say they're not true, right? But had it ever occurred to anybody that I think people underestimate how angry and how enraged a mother or anybody can get when their things are not being addressed, when your concerns and your issues with the district or with teachers or with administrators are not being addressed properly, people get angry. People get upset, right? So if you don't address them, guess what's going to happen, right? Guess what's going to happen, right? What's happening, right? So address it. Address it in a proper way. Address it in an official way and investigate. Relook at the way you look at your budget. Relook at the way, you're allocating your money. What's wrong with the accusations or whatever you want to call them, or allegations or concerns that are being brought up? Investigate them. Investigate them, right? Because what I'm seeing is happening, and that was my concern about a month or two ago, was that it was going to get to the personal. And it did get to the personal, right? And now those who are taking it personally are coming and saying, this is personal, and I want to be protected. And I, as a community member, am saying, not only do you want to be protected, but we want this to be investigated. If, in fact, monies are not being allocated correctly, or maybe ways that the community would like you to do that, maybe it's not an evidently corrupt way of doing things, but whatever.
Please, you're over time.
Okay, so address it, right? And so if you address it, then maybe some of this will go away. But don't turn it around and make it about one person attacking people and not getting to the work that person and other people have kind of brought forward that needs to be investigated.
Thank you.
So this is another topic, or is there somebody else? Sure, go ahead. Okay. All right. Sorry. So, hi, I'm here because from others up front. Now, I'm Felicia Mednick. I live in Amherst. Thank you. And so we recently have been thinking about the possibility of getting electric buses in Amherst. And we had an event about 2 weeks ago at the library. A lot of people came, and we've had some interest on the school board about this. And we've been circulating a petition because we all care about future generations. We all realize we need to start planning now, whether independent on what we can afford right now. So this petition is about that. It's about making a meaningful plan and an affordable plan. Meaningful so that will fit into the overall vision of the carbon reduction that we need to think of as a town and as a schools, and including charging stations and staff training, and affordable, seeking out grants, investigating, funding partners. So here's what it sounds like. And students have now contacted us, and they'll be signing this as well. We've gotten 200 signatures so far. We hope to have many more by next week when we hand it in to you. As residents of the Amherst Pelham Regional School District, we want to take action to help avert the worst effects of climate change. We are concerned for the health and safety of our children and grandchildren and want to take the lead in addressing climate change. One way we can take action locally is to transition our school bus fleet from using fossil fuels to using electricity. Transportation is a major source of greenhouse gas emissions. Transitioning our school bus fleet will not only lower emissions, it will also send a message to our children that we are taking steps to combat climate change and address health concerns related to diesel exhaust to ensure a healthy future for them. We are concerned about the health risks associated with diesel exhaust for children that ride the bus every day. Given that young people have higher breathing rates and are still growing, they are more susceptible to the adverse health effects of diesel exhaust, such as allergies and asthma and more. We believe it will be possible in the coming years to invest in electric buses without raising taxes for the communities by replacing them only as old buses age out and when the projected life cycle cost is close to that of a diesel bus. Therefore, we, the undersigned of Amherst, Pelham, Shutesbury, and Leverett, our parents and community members, submit this petition to the Amherst Pelham Regional School Committee in order to declare our support for an immediate start to planning for a transition from fossil fuel power to electric school buses. We ask that the school committee develop a plan to transition the public school buses to electric as soon as is feasible, including all buses owned and contracted for service, in the context of an overall plan to reduce the carbon footprint in the Amherst Pelham Regional Public Schools. And to, one more sentence, research grants available for funding electric school buses and their charging infrastructure, as well as for the training to properly maintain the vehicles and explore potential funding partnerships. Thank you.
Thank you.
And maybe a committee could be put together to start looking.
Hi, I'm Deb Leonard. I'm a parent of 2 children in the school district. My oldest has now graduated, class of 2019, the class that had only one snow day. And the entire class will forever feel cheated. But I'd just like to say I actually have been attending these meetings, and thank you for the public to coming out, but I have been one of few faces in the audience. I have been watching online. I have been following online. And because this is public comment, I feel it important for me to state publicly that the teachers are here, the community is here for a variety of reasons, but this dialogue is not about factual accusations about management of money. This dialogue really is about hostility, it's about civility, it's about personal attacks, it's about lies being spread, and I cannot stand here and have it go unchallenged that this is really about something that the school district is not investigating. This is really about protecting the people who work in this district, both as elected officials, members of the administration, about students, and about teachers. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jim Bursett. I'm a parent of a class of 2015 graduate who had a wonderful experience here, and I got to know a lot of her classmates and just a very impressive group of students. And I think a lot of their well-being and achievements were directly due to actions by past school committee and administrators, and I just want to thank the current school committee and administrative for kind of continuing that. And I'm speaking today more as a community member because I've been involved with the LSSE Commission and the Recreation Working Group about the athletic fields and other recreation fields in town, particularly the high school and community field. And I just want to express as a community member how important safe, proper, modern facilities are to the community, but particularly to our students and future students. And I just want to urge you to take whatever action as promptly and as quickly as you can to get the athletic facilities back up to the standards that the students now and in the future really deserve. And it's not just, but I think everybody understands the importance of that to their health, to the community spirit, the school spirit. But I also hope that when you're trying to make the case to the public at large for funding, that you remind the community that many students come to the school not just for academics, not just for arts. They come here for athletics because they have always had super coaches and decent facilities. And the school choice aspect of retaining students who are interested in athletics and attracting students can basically pay for these facilities in 10 years. If you don't take action promptly and get these facilities up to where they should be, I think you're going to have budget problems because of students opting out. So I just hope that, you know, there's a holistic approach to this, and you really go forward with bringing up the athletic facilities to the standards that the students need. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello. My name is Mary Lou Conca. I come from Shutesbury. I'm a long time. Oh. My name is Mary Lou Conca. I come from Shutesbury. I'm a long-time community resident. 36 years I have invested as a parent, a grandparent, a foster parent, employee, etc. I'm currently on the School Equity Task Force, as well as the Restorative Justice Group and the Wellness Committee. And I come here to say a couple of things. One, it's a cliche, but it is proper for me to use it here. Don't shoot the messenger. Listen to the message, number one. Number two, I've been on the Wellness Committee for year after year after year, and I believe there's a direct connection to what our children are being fed and how they are behaving in the classroom, and even how they're able to take in the education that you all are responsible for them receiving. So on that note, when you look at your budget, I'm speaking as an individual. I have a petition out. I think you all have seen it. When you look at your budget, I'm convinced that we can afford to give our children clean food. And thank you.
Thank you. Are there additional commenters?
So, as usual, you guys know I don't prepare. I just come up here and
Introduce
blurt.
yourself,
My name is Melissa Giroux, and I'm an Amherst resident. I'm a little taller than this mic. And I have daughters at Crocker Farm in 3rd and 6th grade. And I sometimes get my, I guess what I want to say about Don't Shoot the Messenger is that recently, and it happens a bunch because I co-run an organization with Andrew there called Embrace Race, and get into, for some reason that's made me a target, not totally surprising from all kinds of sides. And recently, and it's happened before, I was accused on Facebook by some of the people putting out, you know, accusations that folks are upset about, of being, you know, being paid by the district and being a super, you know, supporting. The reason that I support Mike Morris is because I'm paid to. And it was really amazing because this is sort of someone who is quite, you know, has a lot of support. I see, and has said stuff about me once before. There was an accusation that, you know, I was a disgrace because I wasn't voting for the person of color in a race, you know. And I find that very insulting to those of us of color, that we can't actually judge people on their ideas. Anyway, all to say that the fact I'm not paid by the district, I've never been paid by the district, and I feel like if I were paid by the district, that I could still support Mike and do that in an authentic, genuine way. Like I can have a debate about, you might not support Mike, but I do, and I don't have to be scum of the earth because I support Mike. So I just want to say, in terms of Don't Shoot the Messenger, what if the messenger's just making it up? Just making it up. You know, and so in this Facebook exchange, oh, you know, isn't this awful? This Embrace Race person, Melissa Giroux, she's paid by Mike. Ugh, we hate him. And I said, actually, I'd love to work with the district. Come pay me, district. But I'm not. And, you know, and this person happened to have been a Mike supporter as well, and was on school committee and voted to appoint Mike. So there's a lot of stuff like that. Like I heard it recently around the testing, a lot of people using the fact that Crocker Farm got lower scores on the MCAS as a cudgel against the district. And I remember some of those same people saying, we don't believe in the test. The tests are racist. And I think the tests are very problematic, and my kids didn't take them for that reason. And the district's being penalized. I was hopeful that the district, my black kids didn't take them, wouldn't be penalized. And now people who I thought were on the same side as I was and thought the tests were problematic are using that to say our teachers aren't doing their jobs, the district's not doing their jobs. So I just want to say that we can't, if we were to investigate everything that someone asked about, there'd be an opportunity cost, like teaching our kids, and many other things. So I hope that made sense.
Thank you. Any other comments? No other comments?
So my first question is, I'm just wondering, my first question is, I have something to hand to you, and I wanted you to acknowledge whether or not you support the military. Yes? Do you support the military?
Can you please introduce yourself?
I am Christie Ryan. Yes, you support the military? Okay. So here's a picture that I just want you to put in front of you. This is a picture of my children's father. And my children. My family is a military family. We moved here after my ex-husband returned from Afghanistan. You have spent a lot of time here discussing me, and I'm here to talk about myself. Before I do, my kids have not seen their father since he returned from Afghanistan 7 years ago, which prompted me to move to this town. He is a disabled veteran due to his service in the Marine Corps. I have earned, as have my children, and have made sacrifices for my freedom of speech and my ability to stand here and speak in a democratic town government-funded space. You will not silence me, and you will not disgrace my family, a military family, and all military families who have made personal sacrifices, my kids the ultimate sacrifice, their father, in order to service your own agenda. I will now exercise my freedom of speech, the right that myself and my kids have paid, and their father for serving this country for all of our rights to speak without interruption. I have 3 children. One is transgender. His name is Izzy, and he was the first transgender student to come out at Wildwood Elementary School. As a result, other transgender students came out, and parents began pulling me aside and whispering, "Thank you for being brave enough to let your child to be himself." It gave me and my child, they said, the courage to stand in their power. Another child who lives with me is biracial, transgender, and has disabilities. I'm currently in the process of fostering a black gay child through DCF. I grew up outside of Boston, and I am from an Irish Catholic family. I attended Boston College. I have my master's in education, and I'm a published author of a social emotional learning curriculum, which is a body of work that I developed in consultation with Massachusetts school psychologists, a Disney illustrator, an MIT professor, and ed tech entrepreneurs.
I need you to
I am a
wrap it up.
licensed
We're out of
vocational
time.
teacher, no, as well as a graphic designer. I am a web developer. A website that I built was launched and earned $30,000 a month and was on Shark Tank. Does that matter? No. I am not here to give you my curriculum
Please wrap
vitae
it up.
as you
We're
do.
over time.
I was repeatedly discussed in this forum, and I'm going to stand here and I'm going to speak without interruption. Thank you.
It is our policy that everybody has 3 minutes.
It is your
and we've been
policy
enforcing
that you would
with
tell
every
the
other
truth in the
commenter.
forum, and I'm going to now represent.
Point of order, is she
Mr.
allowed
Menino?
to go on and talk forever?
Nope, I'm going to read the thing that I had to say, and
Mr.
then
Fox.
I'm going to be done.
Madam Chairperson, I move that we take a 10-minute recess.
Is there a second?
On October 29th, Eric
All those in
Nakajima
favor of
read
10
an
minute
email
recess?
in this forum with one
We're in recess.
snippet. And you wonder why I have my website.
So we're starting up again, and we're going to start with re-looking at the movement on some agenda items so that because we do have a hard stop at 8:35 tonight. I think we'll, after the superintendent's update, very, very brief chair update. I think that we probably will not be discussing the SETF goals
That's right.
tonight, so we can remove that completely from our agenda. We'll come back to that at our January meeting.
Yeah, it wasn't voted tonight, so I think that this should be brought back to the committee. The committee has a copy of the recommended goals and budget guidance, so perhaps in the meeting in January or later.
I do think, I would like to keep the policy as on tonight's agenda and discuss that, possible vote. I also think that the resolution about contractors' wages would be an important discussion and shouldn't take, probably might not even take full 10 minutes, I don't know, but any thoughts on?
My recommendation for the committee is that since some of these items may be relatively brief, let's try to go in order and we can reevaluate at 8 o'clock
Okay.
to see where we are and whether we need to make further adjustments. Does that sound agreeable?
Yeah.
Okay, let's move on then. So moving on, we'll proceed to superintendent's update.
Sure. Sorry, just getting that screen off. Okay, so a couple things to say. And most of the updates in the packet, but I'll start with something that's not in the packet. In our district, we have talented and dedicated staff members who enter public service to better the lives of students in the Amherst Pelham Regional Schools. While all of us needs to be open to feedback, critical feedback, which makes us better in our work, no staff member should be fearful that they'll be targeted or personally attacked for being an employee of the district. My view is that saying that the district is either designed to support teachers or students is a false dichotomy. Simply put, a staff that is not supported to grow and achieve in their classrooms will be unlikely to be successful in working with students. One can have high standards for staff, very high standards for staff, while also supporting them in their work. In the past few months, staff have reported being targeted for multiple protected classes, either real or perceived. They include race ethnicity, which includes at least 3 races or ethnicities, religion, sex, gender identity, age, sexual orientation, and marital status. If these actions were taken by a staff person or student, consequences would be readily identified and implemented. However, when a member or members of the public engages in this behavior, it has been more difficult to identify remedies to this damaging behavior. I am aware that staff have felt hurt, frustrated, and anxious based on the electronic and in-person communication that they have received, and we are working to support staff in all avenues possible. We have received requests for how to support and protect staff members from behavior. We've consulted with legal counsel and have met or exceeded the request that we recently received to make sure staff are supported. I'm optimistic that the policy that will be considered and potentially voted tonight will offer the district additional tools to ensure that staff feel supported in these instances. This is not to say that staff are perfect or infallible or don't make mistakes, But what we do need to do, and I think we heard some tonight, is make sure staff feel protected to do their jobs, come to work, do their best, and not have attacks based on their protected classes or identities. And I think I will leave it there for now. I think I have more to say when the policy comes up, but I'm not sure everyone will be around, so I just thought I wanted to say that now. On to the printed update. Do you want me to talk about this, or do you want to talk about the first one? Okay, sure. I'm going to pass it to Ms. Cunningham, who's got some exciting news about our recent grant that we received, and then I'll take it over. And again, we'll be brief because we understand the time is tight.
Okay, so as Dr. Morris mentioned, we do have good news. We recently became recipients of $90,360 to continue with our teacher diversification that we have been working on for this past school year. So currently we have about 5 paraeducators who are moving on to becoming full-fledged licensed teachers. And through this grant, we're looking to support about 10 more individuals to do the same. So that's what the update is regarding that. If you have any questions as to what the grant entails, please send me an email. I can say that we are looking for someone to help us with the MTEL preparation, because we know and understand that a lot of our staff members fail the MTEL multiple times while trying to get licenses, and so we are working to create an MTEL video course to help our staff, and that is also included in the grant to do that.
Yes. Just a quick question, if I can. I just wanted to know, sort of, did we apply for this grant? Or is this, how did we get it?
So Desi sent out an RFP, and I responded and just applied for the grant, and included things in our request, such as creating a more positive culture in our district. And so they did give us money to work on the culture in the district. And like I said, the MTELs and helping our staff members pass the MTELs through a video program, and just many other things. But just for the sake of time, I just wanted to say that you can reach out.
Okay, yes, thank you.
Thanks.
What is MTEL?
Can we do this one? Sure. So it's the message. I don't do the acronym, but it's the test that you need to achieve licensure in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
For
any area,
teachers,
so
anything.
any professional, so teachers, administrators, and actually one of the things that is happening, I'm on RIAC, I think as you know, the Racial Imbalance Advisory Council that DESE organizes, and there's a lot of discussion because the MTEL is seen as a barrier for statewide for diversifying the faculty and looking at other, either other test modules or other mechanisms so that educators can show their competency other than kind of more standard tests. I mean, I think it goes back to when we think about MCAS, is MCAS the mark we want to have for students to define their capability, and I think there's a similar conversation happening for educators as well. So there's a board meeting coming up. I know that's on the agenda for them as well.
Okay, thank
you. So it's the test for educator licensure.
Okay.
And the first test that most people take is called the communication and literacy test. And most people fail that multiple times, especially people who English is not their native language.
Okay.
And so we're looking to create an avenue to help them to pass.
Okay, thank you.
So I'll try to breeze through the others. So last night, and some of you might have stopped by if you were there for a different reason, but there was a Celo by Literacy and LPAC, which is English Learners Parent Advisory Council meeting, and it was at Wildwood, and it was very highly attended. There was a lot of interest, both of elementary and secondary parents. The Celo by Literacy is something we're looking to implement that allows for, at 6th, 8th, and 12th grade, for students who have skills in more than one language to support them to receive this seal. At the high school level in particular, it's something that goes in the diploma and is a very official part of that. At the 6th and 8th grade level, it's a little more ceremonial, but there are standards that have to be met. And I think there was, around 30 families came last night. So if you went to Wildwood and couldn't find a spot like me and had to go around the side, that was because of that meeting. So thanks to Ms. Richardson for organizing that meeting and staff members for facilitating the sessions. There was also a meeting at the end where our finance director met with LPAC families about budget priorities and how funding is spent as it relates to English language learners. I'm going to just mention Summit. They have their annual community Thanksgiving event. It's a wonderful event, and what makes it wonderful isn't just the food and all that, but it's around the community building aspects. There were many, many families there. The band the Summit Academy band played, but there was a number of retired staff members who come back every year and reconnect with students and their former colleagues, and just a wonderful event, and thanks to Mr. Slovin for organizing that. Last month, I attended the MSAN, the Minority Student Achievement Conference, along with Mary Custard, Gloria Davis, who are staff members at the high school, as well as Dr. Guevara, who works at central office. Speakers included Dr. Gloria Ladson-Billings, very inspirational. Ms. Custard and Ms. Davis were on a panel about student voice, and they shared their work at the high school, both in terms of the student course that Ms. Davis teaches, as well, and Ms. Custard in terms of the many roles she plays, including the student conference. And the full schedule, if you click on that hyperlink, it's digitally, it's online, and if you click on it, you can see all the events and who the speakers were. But I think that'll be an agenda topic, perhaps coming up, talk more generally about MSAN. So we did hopefully have the students coming in January, so I think at that point I can share more details on that. And I think just in the name of time, it's not that I don't want to talk about the other things that are not important. I think I'll end there if that's okay. Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Cunningham would like to add one. My apologies.
So I just want to add that today the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Human Resources was interviewed by the NPR radio station just to talk about the things that we are doing for teacher diversification and in hiring and retaining staff of color. The show or the radio cast will air after the holiday, and we'll just keep you guys updated as to when to listen for it.
Great. Thank you.
Can
Mr.
it be
Menino?
posted to the website?
Excuse me?
Can it be posted to the website?
I'm not sure. I'm not, I don't know how to do all of that, but Sasha, I'll get her and see what she can do.
Okay. For next on our agenda is the chair's update, which very brief. I'm standing in as the chair today. But as we all know, we canceled our budget meeting on Thursday because it conflicted with the Amherst Town State of the Town meeting. We will continue with the executive session as originally planned at 7:30 instead. And we likely will be posting tomorrow a new public meeting, open meeting on Monday evening. So be on the lookout for that. Thanks to everybody for doing the doodle poll pretty quickly. And the purpose of that meeting has multiple purposes. It will not be the budget. We will look to rescheduling that in January. But it will be potentially to discuss the contract negotiations that we've been having an executive session for the past 3 months. Mr. Menino.
Clarification, by new public meeting, you mean there will be a meeting of the Regional School Committee on Monday?
Correct, sorry. Thank you for the clarification.
Time and place?
6:30.
Here?
Here in the high school? Yeah.
Thank you.
Moving on to subcommittee updates. Any subcommittee updates? Okay, none. Okay, so we'll move on to new and continuing business. Item A, policy AAC, harassment prevention and standards of conduct. This is a discussion and possible vote. I believe this is the third time we've looked at this policy in meeting, and as the chair of the policy subcommittee, I'll talk to this briefly. So hopefully folks have had a chance to review this latest version of the policy. It was sent out in our packet the other day. The changes in this since the last time we looked at this are really focused in the section B, the higher standard of conduct, which now has not only the input and approval or blessing, if you will, of our attorneys. It also has been approved at last week's Pelham School Committee meeting. So we are, I think that was the biggest area of change on that since the last time I reviewed it. Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I think just for people who may not have seen those prior discussions, this came, and you mentioned Pelham, this came originally because of concern that staff had in the Pelham Public School District, and it was around behavior on this Pelham school property that wasn't actually directed explicitly at Pelham school staff, but had a pretty harmful impact on their work environment. And so I think I say that because I want to generalize this, that this is, from my perspective, not a policy that is being considered in an acute or a finite moment or about one individual or another individual or even one district. This is around making a statement from my perspective that we want to make sure that staff members can come to work and feel supported, that, again, to go back to what I said earlier, there's going to be critique on the work part, but they should be protected to feel safe, to make sure that their protected classes, their identities are not used in ways that affect them and affect their workplace in meaningful ways. And so that's was the thinking in Pelham, and certainly Ms. Dancer or Mr. Mineo can correct me if I said anything incorrect about the origins in Pelham. And none of this prevents critique of staff members. It's really around how does that happen and what are the standards of behavior that we anticipate and expect and can guarantee for staff members moving forward. So from an administrative point of view, it's going to be a very helpful tool to be able to kind of do what we talked about earlier and provide those necessary supports and protections for staff members. So that's what I wanted to say.
Any comments, questions? Yes, Mr. Menino.
I voted for this policy at the Pelham School Committee, and I plan to vote for it tonight.
Mr. Funch?
Yeah, I think this is an incredibly important document, particularly given what was spoken of earlier this evening. And I think it's testimony to how complicated this problem of bullying and harassment is at the length of the policy. It's a little off-putting, it's so long, but it's necessary to cover all the possibilities. I do have one question about one section, and that's the application of policy. I believe it's on the second page.
Page 2.
And given my understanding of that section, this policy covers actions taken by people who are not members of the Amherst Pelham Regional School District. Is that correct?
Can you say that one more time? I'm sorry, I was looking at one particular clause. My apologies,
My
Mr. Funch.
interpretation of this section is that it covers behavior by people who are not members of the Amherst Pelham Regional School District. Is that correct?
Yes.
Well then, in the paragraph that begins harassment and ends with the word victim, I'm just curious if the policy committee thought about potential, not consequences, but responses to behavior by outside individuals, legal, otherwise, that should be in here.
Yes and no. So we did specifically talk about the consequences in terms of, so there's separate sections because there's a difference between protected class harassment and then the section B, which is about the higher standard of conduct. So the consequences that are outlined in section A are more sort of ensconced in law as protected class. And in section B, and then you see in section C where consequences, remedies, and prevention has been separated out, it's a little bit, let's say, there isn't legal guidance on that, and that's sort of where we relied heavily on input and support from our legal counsel.
Okay, thank you. But I think in light of particularly the comments made by members of the APA this evening, that we need to make a much more concrete statement about the protection that we're going to provide, certainly employees and all staff members, but also children under our authority. And I don't know if this is just a final step, or if this is possibly the first of several steps that we might take to ensure that the kind of outside behavior that threatens people and kids is thwarted. I just don't know the answer to that question. So, and I don't know if we are in a place where we can determine what the potential legal consequences might be for that kind of behavior.
Peter,
So I would agree with Mr. Fonch's concern. My understanding of that that point is that, you know, as a policy, it's really guiding. It's really a guideline, right? And so it speaks about actions. It speaks about consequences without saying exactly what those actions or consequences are. So I feel like to get any more precise about exactly what should happen would be a little too constraining for administration, given that we don't know all the particulars. Plus, I have a feeling this isn't the last time this committee is going to be discussing this topic, so I'm sure that there are additional actions / statements that we can take. So while I have the mic, I'll just continue on. I just do want to make a quick comment. If this is the first meeting that you're watching to discuss this, we've talked about this difference between protected classes and this higher standard of conduct. And the section that really, I think, defines it well, it says that there's the section of the policy clarifies that there is conduct that, although not unlawful harassment based on protected class status, so those would be things like religion and race, etc., could still interfere with work or academic performance by creating an environment that is not conducive to professional, academic, and/or social emotional success for students or employees. Such behavior constitutes violation of the policy. So that's been really the focus of our discussions about how we're trying to expand this protection. So I just wanted to put a point on that, since this has a lot of attention right now, and so it's good to explain the thrust of it. I did a brief question for the superintendent. So like Mr. Fonch mentioned, we did hear pretty emphatically from the teacher union president about a need for action. And you mentioned in your superintendent's update that you have been engaged in responding with actions. Does this policy, as stated, facilitate that? Will this help you? Is this going to give you the guidelines to act more efficiently, more directly and clearly than you're currently able to in the current policy?
Yeah, it's absolutely, and that really came from, again, to go back to Pelham, I think the principal did a good job of communicating about the incident there, and it still, we didn't have a policy that really defined some of the, particularly the consequences, remedies, and prevention. We had a lot of policies for students and staff and for members of the public. We really didn't have anything explicit. You know, it could be implied from certain other policies, but it wasn't explicit, and this significantly shifts the ability of administrators to cite policy and taking actions to support staff members in that way. So there's a long-winded way of saying yes, but I wanted to explain the context.
Is there dinner?
So I just wanted to thank the policy subcommittee for putting this together and incorporating a lot of our feedback and changes that we've made during the past few sessions that we've reviewed this draft policy. One question, under section B for higher standard of conduct, paragraph 3, where it says the superintendent as necessary may develop guidelines for the implementation of this policy. I feel that this policy actually requires us being more resolute about things like this. And so I am wondering if the committee would consider us changing the word may to will develop guidelines. I think that, again, given everything that we've talked about before, it merits having that stronger language there and to show action that, that the district is actually taking this seriously. And I think also similarly, the second sentence there, if the superintendent does develop such guidelines, should be shifted to say when the superintendent develops such guidelines, they shall be published in the appropriate handbooks.
I view that favorably, just in case.
Looking and seeing nodding heads.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Mr. Demmer?
I move to approve policy AAC, harassment prevention and standards of conduct, as presented and as amended by Mr. Dunyan.
Second.
All those seeing a motion and a second, any further discussion? No? All those in favor? It's a unanimous. Yeah. 7.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to item B, resolution about contractors' wages. So this resolution is coming out of prior discussions at earlier meetings about wanting to avoid hiring Mouse Corps for future work, and how can we do this in a way that complies with state procurement laws and other guidelines. So I'm going to look to you
Sure.
to introduce this, because I believe Mr. Nakajima drafted this resolution. So.
Yeah, and we worked on it together, and so I can speak to it. So I think one of the things that came out last spring was trying to figure out a legal way to make decisions that didn't enable us to use that vendor again based on the feedback we received. And so, as you said, how to contract with vendors is governed by many, many state procurement laws. And so this was Mr. Nakajima and I's best draft anyway now to have a resolution that then eventually could be put into policy. It's hard because there are many roles that are legal to pay below the minimum wage. For instance, food service staff, not in the district, but in right. And if you go to a restaurant, there are other roles that do not pay the current minimum wage. That's why the word prevailing is there. So it's trying to make it clear that it needs to provide the prevailing minimum wage. And there's also language, minimum wages regardless of acts to the contrary. So for instance, in the future, if there are other changes to state procurement law that allow for shifting of that, this offers a protection for that. And I feel a little awkward speaking for Mr. Nakajima, but I feel like I can in this one because we've talked about it quite a bit, is that this is the end of this, or near the end of this school committee session, given that there's going to be a changeover based on the Amherst election, and there was a desire, while the timing wasn't there to put it in policy, to have a resolution that at least dictated the policy subcommittee to create a policy that would keep this in place and ensure that any vendors we use offered payment schemes and payment plans and fair trade practices that would be consistent with the values of the district. So that was the idea of a resolution. I know some people were wondering resolution and not policy, but there's only so many policies a policy subcommittee can look at once. But I think I can say for Mr. Nakajima, he really wanted to make sure this happened by the end of this term.
Mr. Medina?
Other than the contentious issue of aquarium, do we know how many vendors currently do not pay the prevailing minimum wage?
I don't have a
I mean,
discrete
is this going to affect future contracts? I mean, would it affect the previous contracts other than the one with the point of contention?
It would not. I could only go back the last 3 years and looking at it, but it would not have affected other ones.
Mr. Ponch?
Yeah, I'm very much aware of and appreciate the context that kind of created the opportunity to create this resolution. I think it's very unfortunate, just as an aside, that the community conversation about that was one side pitted against another. As someone who's worked in a prison facility, the issue of inmate labor is a difficult one to crack. People need to talk to inmates who get out of the jail or the prison. It's nice for them to get out. It's true that they don't get much money, so you're kind of weighing things. And I think it's really unfortunate that discussion kind of fell by the wayside, an in-depth discussion. But my question about this is, had any consideration been given to incorporated union membership language in it?
Without Mr. Nakajima here, I can't say for sure. I apologize that I can't answer it. I don't remember it coming up in our conversations, but prevailing is sometimes a word that has a specific association with labor. And so I can understand how one might think that, but without him here, I feel ill-prepared to give you an answer because I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Any other questions? Ms. Ordonez?
I just, I appreciate the answer from the superintendent about, we have a lot of policies to review. I'm also very well aware of the fact that a resolution doesn't necessarily give us the same structure or can hold us accountable in the same way that a policy can. And so I am wondering if, I think a resolution is great. I'm glad that we're doing this, and I'm glad that we're doing this, and it's by necessity a public meeting, and, we're hopefully passing something like this. But I do want to encourage the committee to have policy subcommittee draft a, policy around this. And I understand that we'll have to have legal, counsel on this matter, given the fact that it does run contrary to state law. This is something that came up when the issue originally, surfaced, that any decision that we made around, accepting bids would by necessity have to accept, Mass Core simply because they are in the state system and there was no other vendor that was available. However, I think that, this district has made it very clear that this is not something that we are willing to tolerate if we don't have to. And if it's possible for us to pass a policy by which we, at the very least, send a very strong message that we want to fight this, that it's worth fighting. It's not something that we want to just take very lightly, and then we want to just continue to take that practice. So it's not for tonight's discussion, but at some future meeting, it would be great to see that come up at a policy level.
So, Mr. Menino and then Mr. Funch.
What is the difference between the impact of a resolution and a policy?
Well, so typically the way that we, in practice, resolutions are sort of a statement from the committee about something that we believe versus a policy that is actually binding for our work. Exactly.
Binding, non-binding.
Exactly.
Mr. Funch?
Yes, can a motion to approve or disapprove of this resolution can be amended to include a reference to forward this topic to the policy subcommittee?
So I think that's why the third paragraph was written how it was, because the be it resolved that it was the verb is will implement. So I think that was intended to be perhaps maybe different language could help, but it was intended to be directive around that.
Yeah. Mr. Devlin?
Yeah, so I agree with. So I agree with Mr. Donias and Mr. Funch, who both said two halves of a thought, which is this is a complex topic that requires an in-depth discussion that we haven't had, and if we're going to have a firm position on it, it should be embodied in policy. So for me, I feel like the most appropriate action item out of this agenda item is to formally refer it to the policy subcommittee for to draft up a policy. I'm really quickly reading through the text of the resolution, and I'm having trouble marking off which words I would have to delete and which words I would have to insert in order to feel like I could comfortably, affirmatively say, yes, I support this as a resolution. I get the spirit of it. I don't want to, out of a rushness to support the spirit, pass a resolution that doesn't hold legal muster, and I'm not a lawyer. So I'm looking at things like requires vendors, that it may be that we get that into a policy, but I don't know. So I think the affirmative forward action would be to refer it to policy subcommittee.
Ms. Cunningham?
That happens now.
That's our trick microphone.
Either way, I think you guys can hear me. I just wanted to go a little further beyond the policy in this proposal here. To say that when the topic was brought to the attention of the school committee, we just heard it and then voted that same day. And I think we should go beyond just hearing this that day, or when something is being brought to your attention, and then making a decision at that time, and looking to find a way to say, let's pause. A policy, I don't know if your policy will say pause for a couple days, think about what is being said, look at the implications prior to voting and making any decisions about anything that we're getting ready to do. So I'm just saying, we need more than just a policy for this. We need a way of looking at everything that is brought in front of us.
I'll just add to that. I think I agree. I think that makes a lot of sense as a policy subcommittee member. We have that policy actually with policy, that we have to read it once, and we typically do not vote on it at the same time. So I think we have precedent for that. Any other? Do we want Mr. Funch?
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm going where I supposed to go. Can I move to refer the substance of this resolution to the policy committee prior to taking a vote?
Yep.
Then so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? So we're voting to refer this resolution to the policy subcommittee meeting for further work. All those in favor? It's unanimous, 7-0-0.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to item C, athletic fields capital projects. This is a discussion to share information about how we're going to proceed with schematic design phase of planning for athletic fields improvement.
Sure. So we talked about this topic a few months ago, and there was an interest that we received from the school committee to expedite the beginnings of a schematic design phase for the athletic fields and not wait for a capital project to get going, and you know, that money, those funds wouldn't become available till July, and realistically, you know, by the time you actually get organized, you're at the fall. So we've worked with Mr. Mangano and the finance office, and you remember the first quarter budget update, one reasonable, given some of the savings, unanticipated savings that were presented in that report and have continued, would be to transfer $30,000 to $50,000 from risk and benefits and special education to the facilities department, which would be, we feel comfortable with because we have fewer out-of-district placements, and we know that we have some risk and benefit savings that'll start next month from the MedEx rates, which we talked about then as well. So we're not asking, to Ms. Cunningham's point, we're not asking for a vote tonight for that transfer. It's actually just raising this as a possibility to your, you know, bring it to your attention, and bring it perhaps back to a vote in early January once you've had time to consider this. We feel comfortable, I'll say I feel comfortable with where our budget is and our ability to do that, just to transfer those funds to get this study started. And I think 6 months can make a significant difference in getting started, and especially getting started in the summer is always hard with capital projects that involve community engagement. Sometimes if it's just for, you know, facilities or maintenance staff, that's a great time to get going, but when this is something that we would want lots of people involved with, and kicking off a project when many people are away or otherwise occupied doesn't seem like the best course of action. So what I want to do is get any feedback that you have, and then I can bring it back in January for a formal budget transfer vote, and then if it's affirmative, we can get going.
Ms. Stancer?
Question. So when you say getting started, you're thinking of the community appeal, you know, the attempt to do fundraising outside of the school's financial responsibilities. So you're thinking that if we do this, when would we be able to start that aspect?
So my personal opinion is that once we get actually a plan developed, that's where people, you know, I think getting the skeleton of fundraising, that's nothing that we can do as staff members, but there are structures that can be in place. But I think it's getting a group of people together to figure out what's a reasonable first phase of this project. Having kind of landscape architects and folks work on that, getting vision of what that looks like. That's a way to generate public interest and acknowledgement of the work. And you know, as Mr. Sullivan knows, having worked on that working group, every time you had a public meeting, you had a lot more people asking questions, a lot more interest, and having that work continue in a much more specific way than where we got to on the prior study. That's the type of thing that I imagine this money would fund. Because right now, as you remember, our dollar amounts are all very loose and fuzzy, and it's really hard to talk to the public when we have such a range, and it's more making decisions. What does the first phase look like? What's the cost going to be? What are the implications for multiple sports, and getting that specifics so that you can build that public awareness and hopefully the capacity for people to be involved in the process.
So I guess, I don't know if maybe I didn't ask my question well enough. So if we do this, which I think is a great idea, would you anticipate, we would hire someone to start this, and it would be during this school year?
It would likely extend beyond this school year.
Right, but it would begin in this school year.
Yes.
And so you would be able to start inviting the public into forums like the ones that you had for the previous study that was done.
And yes, in addition to that, it would be the kind of working group, or would be beyond a working group, who'd be working with designer on this, would also, involve members of the public as well as staff members.
Great.
So there's one thing about how do you engage the larger public, but it's also how do you get a critical group of stakeholders who are willing to participate and be involved in the decision-making process of what this schematic design actually looks like. So both
That's
are true.
good. That's, I just wanted, and I'm happy to hear your answer.
Mr. Menino?
This transfer is truly neutral. These expenditures will be paid for by the savings in another category.
Right, so the two areas that we're targeting are the risk and benefits, because we know we know now that the MedEx rates are going down 1% from what we budgeted for, because we didn't have that information when we were developing the budget. And in terms of special education, we have fewer out-of-district placements based on students aging out, students moving, students returning to the district programs instead of out-of-district. So I wouldn't say it's budget neutral. It's budget neutral in the overall sense, but it is a reduction in certain lines, but those are lines that are coming in under budget. And I think moving forward, we would be looking to enhance this, whatever is put forward here. We are looking at Community Preservation Act for the 4 communities and other ways to buttress this, but this would be getting the process started, getting going, not waiting till the next fiscal year to get started.
Is there Dennis?
So just a couple of things. One, I think this committee needs to be able to see, the amounts that are being discussed, and have that for the community's information as well. So whether it's a presentation or just a document that has the budget items identified, that would be really helpful for understanding and just for continuing conversation. And then I guess my second question is, you mentioned Mr. Sullivan was sitting on the group that was studying this problem. I'm wondering if Mr. Sullivan would want to speak to this, if you have any thoughts related to this.
Actually, I do. My first one is that, I'm a big advocate of pushing forward, because that committee that I sat on, we did what we were supposed to, but we just hit a wall where there was a pretty picture that came out of that, but that's where it stopped. There was no plan of action beyond that. I mean, there were some preliminary numbers and things, but there was no one to do any work beyond the pretty picture. So it's super important that if we're gonna do something, that we set some money aside to do that. But I do have an issue with the money coming from the special ed fund, because that's the kind of thing that tomorrow can change again.
Mr. Font?
Yeah, following up on what Mr. Sullivan just said, special ed, for the people that I spend most of my time with talking about budgets and whatnot, is unfortunately treated rather unfairly, and a lack of understanding of how expensive it is for out-of-district placements. And it would help me, and I don't know if I can ask for this if it's private information, how many out-of-district placements we have and at what cost?
Yeah, we can do that. I think a variable that's particularly important that we can bring back, we can update from the first quarter budget update, is how many fewer and the dollar amount less from what we projected last year to what we're experiencing now might be helpful, whether people agree in the end to pull from that line or not. But this is, it's not sort of hypothetical. It's, kids we know either are back in the district or out, and that could change. So I think that's a really valid point. But our cushion based on the number of students who have returned from district programs or had other changes is pretty significant for the dollar amount we're talking here, because out-of-district placement, residential out-of-district placement can easily be 6 figures. And so that's all information we'll bring back next time.
If you could provide that prior to budget discussions with the 4 towns, I would really appreciate it.
Absolutely. That's a great point. Thank you.
Mr. Devon?
So 2 points. One, you mentioned how this project, more than maybe the average capital project in our towns, is going to involve a significant amount of collaboration with outside fundraising. And I really think there's a lot of enthusiasm and also acknowledgement of the reality. I mean, I'm sure everybody here knows about the capital projects in Amherst, and other towns have other capital projects. We have other capital needs across the region. So, you know, the capital dollar is stretched thin. I think there's awareness of that and yet excitement. So I think if you have this time between now and January to think about how best to incorporate the athletic director, how best to incorporate the booster clubs, you know, structurally that might look a little different than a normal capital project with a vanilla public engagement component might look. And the other question is, and I guess I just can't let this go. So I'm not questioning whether or not we do have the cushion or not. But it does create this perception sometimes, and I've heard this comment before that that if you don't want to spend around $50,000, then the answer is, well, budgets are tight and every dollar counts. And if you do want to spend $50,000, then it's, we'll find the $50,000. And so I understand that we're talking about a budget of many millions of dollars, and so $50,000 is a relatively small percentage. I just wish there was a way where we could look at some of these volatile accounts to say, well, that actually is a higher than average cushion, or that actually is a concerning cushion, and so $50,000 is a higher risk to take at this particular time. I think that's the kind of information.
Yeah, so I think one of the hard things to share is that the budget that gets voted every year is an estimate. We don't know exactly the students who are going to come to us. We don't exactly know the salaries of the staff members we're going to hire. It's not down to the penny. We have everything figured out because unexpected things happen. And that happens on the human side in terms of students and faculty. It happens on the infrastructure side. It happens on the snow side, you know, not my favorite topic of the moment. But when we have lots of snowstorms, it means we're paying a lot of overtime for our custodial and maintenance staff to take care of the buildings and for our DPWs at the town side, which Selva knows to take care of what they need to take care of. So it's an estimate. Special ed is one of the most volatile areas. And it's frankly because, you know, the costs are significant. We take care of kids' needs. That's what our job is. And based on the students we have and those needs change over time, it is hard to estimate. So, you know, for those who have been on the committee for a couple years ago, we had a major jump in out-of-district placements. It wasn't about particularly programming. It was that just the students who came in had more needs than were anticipated. Some of that to move into one of our 4 communities, and sometimes its needs change. And sometimes we have years, like as was talked about at the 410 meeting on Saturday, like this year, where we're seeing the opposite trend. And I think the only thing you can guarantee is it's not going to be predictable, and it's not going to stay the same. And so I think you're right to be concerned about where we pull information, or where we pull $30,000 to $50,000 from. And I think if we can bring that information back, and if at the end of the day the committee says, no, we don't want to do this, we don't want to pull that money, that's a comfortable decision for us. And really this was a response to what we heard from the committee of try to find a way to do it and start it this year. And if it's not something that the committee is comfortable with, you know, from the staff side, we're okay with that. It just means it's going to delay the process and that's really your decision to make. So what the take home I'm walking away with is we'll come with a lot more information next time, and then you all get to make the decision whether we move forward with this sooner or if we wait till the summer. Kind of what we're seeing as financial trends, which we'll share more. The second quarter will be done then. We can bring the second quarter report. Makes us feel comfortable with where we're sitting based on the out-of-district placements that are, you know, 6 months into the fiscal year. That's what it looks like, and we feel comfortable with that, and that was unanticipated because we don't know what students are going to come and what students are going to leave. That being said, you're all raising really valid points, and then you'll have a difficult decision to make in January, but we'll certainly be able to provide you with the information requested.
Any more comments? Questions? Okay. Thank you. And I think we discussed that we were moving the SETF, the next item, the SETF goals and budget guidance, to a January meeting to give the SETF time to vote. So we'll move on to, or did you want to, I think we can probably.
I think we're good. This will be quick.
Make it through?
Yeah.
Okay. So looking at the 2020-2021 school calendar, possible vote. Review the calendar with a slight revision from the version presented last month.
Yeah, and we're disappointed because I know there were some students who advocated for a change that's being made, and I apologize. My my line of vision was not good enough to capture at least one of those students. So I'm going to briefly, because of time, mention that, but I know you all received an email that I received as well. With Principal Jones, had an excellent conversation with some students from the high school, And they were advocating for a couple things. And I think it's worth noting, while the students are part of a group that's combating anti-Semitism, they were advocating for religious holidays more generally, not just the ones that they themselves celebrate. I think it's really important to note that. One of the requests, which we are following through on, is before the next school year, develop a list of major holidays of all faiths. And share that frequently with staff members, so it's not incumbent upon the students to remind faculty of the holidays that they're celebrating, that the administration, particularly central administration, takes on a lot of that role, which was a fabulous idea that we will work on and will have in place before the next school year. One of the other requests they made was really looking at the Jewish high holidays of Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. As it happens, next year, Rosh Hashanah occurs during the weekend, so there is no conflict with the school schedule. Yom Kippur is celebrated on Monday, which is September, I gotta look at the calendar that's in here, September 28th. So the first draft you looked at that was supported by the Teachers Association had an early release day in September on September 30th. We had a good conversation. The group advocated for having Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah off. My personal perspective is where we are in process. That was a hard thing to pull off, and I think it would encompass a broader conversation I'd want to include the school committee on as it relates to calendar. Calendar items generally are ho-hum. That's been the last couple of years for the school committee, but I think that's one that certainly we'd want to engage the community and the elected officials on. But I thought one of the students at the time came up with a really good solution, at least for next year, which was to move the early release day from September 30th to September 28th. So our early release days are typically like tomorrow on Wednesdays, but there's no rule that it can't be on a Monday. And this was cleared with the APEA president, Mick O'Connor. I think it's a really creative solution to at least reduce the burden on students who choose to celebrate or do celebrate Yom Kippur by not coming to school to make it a condensed day. Reduces some of the impact on the students. And one of the things I heard is some students don't celebrate the religious holiday because they're so engaged in the school and feeling like they'll be behind, and it reduces some of the impact. So I took them up on that offer to integrate that into the calendar. So the only difference from last month is that in September, the early release day is on the 28th and not the 30th, and that's the reasoning why. I tried to do that succinctly. I'm sorry, there's a lot there.
Any comments, questions from the committee? Mr. Demling, I'm always looking this way, so.
I appreciate the change in short order. Looking at next year's calendar, thinking about the planning process for next year's calendar, when ought we to start that? What's the pin we put in to make sure that we have as robust a discussion as we need?
So my opinion is that'd be a really good conversation for the spring, because I think once we get to fall, it's weird to say, but we're already thinking about the following year, and so when, and I'm not sure we'll have time to get into it tonight, but I can put a placeholder, because I update the last page, our school committee planning, for sometime in May to really have some conversations about, April or May, to have some conversations about the calendar for the following year. But I think that's a really important point, because I think inertia can just push us back to where we're in October, November, and having the same conversation a year from now. So thank you.
Okay. Mr. Menino?
You might want to look at the way UMass follows it. Back in the day, 10 years ago, when I taught there, I knew all the religious holidays. They publish a list, or it's part of the master calendar. You can't avoid knowing something's coming up.
Yeah, and DESE used to provide one for us, and I think I have not seen it the last couple of years, but they used to have a really nice one that captured the major religious holidays of in Massachusetts anyway. But we'll just create our own, and maybe UMass we can gently borrow.
I don't remember, but they had a system that worked.
Yeah, no, that's really helpful. I can connect with them.
Okay. Mr. Bunch?
Yeah, I think this is long overdue and much appreciated, Michael. Thank you for doing this. My only question is, do you know if the 28th is the night of Yom Kippur or the full day of Yom Kippur?
It is the full day of Yom Kippur.
It is, okay. Thank you.
And I'm sorry.
Please, I was going to ask something different, so.
Please. I'll remember.
So it looks like this is a possible vote for tonight.
Yeah.
And so, I would be prepared to vote tonight if the chair will accept a motion and if it pleases the committee. It seems like a fairly simple thing to do.
I can hold my comment till after that.
Okay. Is there a motion?
I move to approve the 2020-2021 school calendar as presented and discussed tonight.
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Funk. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Unanimous?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I appreciate thanking me, but really it's the students, and I'm not just saying this because you're here, it wasn't just you, but it was the students should be thanked because I thought they were able to articulate a really strong position to engage in dialogue, which doesn't always happen, and recognize that there's competing factors and come up with a solution that both, was functionally operational in the district and also supported their advocacy efforts, and also their email was just really good writing. So I'm just going to say that yay for English teachers and our students, because in social studies and science, and lots of places teach writing, not just English, but just their ability to articulate their thoughts, I found very inspiring and spoke a lot about the students, but also the education they've received. So I just want to say that. Thank you. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item F, UFCW negotiations appointment. So this is a discussion to appoint one of the members of our committee to be engaged with administrative staff in the contract negotiations with the United Food and Commercial Workers Union.
I can just give a little context, which is most of our negotiations won't occur for most of our bargaining units till the following year. But if you remember, since we went in-house with our food service, they're a little off-cycle. And so we did receive a request to engage in bargaining from this. And in the past, it's generally been it hasn't been a full subcommittee, it's been one member who's participated with UFCW. And the time constraints it's really hard to know, like any negotiation. But we're looking for at least one member to engage with our administrative team on that negotiations. Anything you want to add? Or? Okay.
And when does that begin approximately? And
I just know it's in the spring, so possibly March or something.
Mr. Fonch?
Yeah, I would volunteer for this, but I'm a little embarrassed to do so because I haven't been signing warrants for the last couple of weeks, and I want to thank people who took over for me while I was kind of incapacitated. So I'll continue to do that, but I would be interested in sitting on the group.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to item G, school committee agenda planning. Doesn't look like we have anything on the agenda for our next meeting.
So what I think is we'll make.
I'm sorry, our next meeting is, as I said, potentially on Monday at 6:30, December 16th. Okay.
And I'll just say that we'll do some work. The chair will be back in short order, and we'll do some work because clearly there's a lot of things on there. The thing I want to say is that MSAN update, that may involve students coming, and so if that happens, it's going to be incumbent just to make sure if the student schedule works, I want to make that happen when it works for them, because they're going to share about their experience from the Amherst trip, as well as Ms. Custard, Ms. Davis, myself, and Dr. Guevara about I think ongoing MSAN work for adults, not just students. I think we'd like to just re-engage the committee. I know one community at least had their school board, it was a different state, kind of formally, and I'm not saying we need to do this, but formally vote about continuing to engage in MSAN, and I think I'd like to talk through that. So that's a pretty big topic. SETF seems like the January meeting, they'll be ready to share. The athletic funds, certainly there's some time sensitivity to, and I'll work with the chair to revise some of the other ones. I also put a placeholder around the following year's calendar on April 28th, so we can come back to it. Also on that meeting on Monday, I'm sorry, I'm skipping around a bit, that you talked about earlier, we were originally going to do warrants on Thursday of this week because there was another meeting, but now that meeting's not till Monday, we'll have to add warrants to that meeting agenda next week, just for the region, because that's planned to be a joint meeting. But
okay. Ms. Ordonez?
I just wanted to, I guess, it was announced at the beginning of this meeting that the meeting that was previously scheduled for this Thursday was supposed to be a budget review meeting. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we've been talking about for a while. And so obviously the January 14th meeting is completely packed solid. So that won't be for that day. I'm just wondering if there has been any thought or recommendations as to when in January that could happen. It seems like sooner rather than later because of the budget process schedule, right? Would be a good idea.
And because we're going to have a new member who will have absolutely no experience with the budget and will be expected to vote.
So I think that's good feedback. I'll bring back to the chair and I'll make a note around that, trying to do it as early in January as possible.
Great. Thank you.
Mr. Font?
Speaking of Thursday's meeting, it is at 7:30, not 6:30, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay.
There are gifts.
Okay.
Where I put them, it's a different, there we go. I apologize.
Oh, I'm sorry, just one more thing before we move on, calendar.
Yes, sir, Dennis?
So there had been a recommendation at the SETF subcommittee that students, and I believe the chair, actually, Chair Nakajima had recommended this as well at some point earlier in the year, that the students lead the school committee through a restorative practice circle. So I think that is something that could probably be coordinated through the RJ coordinators here in the high school. But it seems like it would be a great opportunity for the community to learn more about the Restorative Justice Program, considering how much has been invested already in the program,
that would be
and to see
great.
the students shine, really.
Yes, I do remember talking about that.
Right,
Yep.
exactly, and I think earlier this year, the students did a great job of explaining to the committee. We had a very different informal sort of meeting in that circle of sofas over there. But they were wonderful, and they helped explain the work that goes on in the Restorative Justice Program, but it wasn't an actual circle. So this is a slightly different process that just familiarizes the committee and the community with that program. And we have two excellent coordinators that would probably be very helpful in setting everything up.
That would be great.
Thank you.
So we have gifts. Motion? Mr. Dillon?
Nobody wants to read gifts. I move to accept the following gifts from the Arts Friends of the Performing Arts, check number 304, to support student activities theater in the amount of $900. Arts Friend of the Performing Arts, check number 305, student activities chorus, to support student activities chorus in the amount of $500. From Arts Friends of the Performing Arts, check number 306, to support student activities pep band in the amount of $500. Arts Friend of the Performing Arts, check 307, to support student activities orchestra in the amount of $500. Arts Friends of the Performing Arts, check number 308, to support student activities dance in the amount of $200. Anonymous Your Cause, number 560-188-8863, to support arms at principal discretion in the amount of $10. And Anonymous Your Cause, number 560-188-8863, same number, arms at principal discretion in the amount of $10. And finally, from Ralph Luce, to support 6 elite women's NFHS basketballs, microfiber 28.5 for ARHS girls basketball, estimated value $350 for a total of $2,620.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Ms. Ordonez. Any discussion, comment? No? All those in favor? It's unanimous. Okay. And now we're at item 8. So we are so move to adjourn to executive session in accordance with open meeting law MGL C30A, section 21A, pursuant to purpose 1, to discuss complaint brought against a public employee, Michael Morris, with no plans to return to open session.
So moved.
Second.
Seconded by Ordonez. And this has to be a roll call vote.
Demling, aye.
McDonald, aye.
Ordonez, aye.
Stancer, aye.
Sullivan, aye.
Fonchai.
Menino, aye.